Story for today is Elon perfection causes delays that cost billions of dollars in the Berlin gigafactory. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you want helpful charts and trading ideas on a daily basis during the trading week, as well as videos that are exclusive, please sign up for our Patreon group to receive that. So today is kind of a 2.0 for an earlier show that we had done regarding the German gigafactory. As you all know, part of the reason Tesla stock price is down about $30 right now is that there's a 6-month delay on the completion of the factory that's been introduced as a likely number. That number could be a 4 or 5 month delay, or it could be a 6 to 9 month delay. We'll find out about that as it happens. I wanted to do some more digging on this because there's a lot of back and forth in comments at the end of our show regarding FUD, etc. So there are a couple of data points I wanted to introduce and then follow up with some research we did with an expert in the field. The first data point is that the New York Times actually had an article that was written based on a 17-page letter written by Elon Musk / Tesla and sent to the German government. In essence, what the letter said was that to date, Tesla only has a preliminary approval to build a factory. So as a result, there is some risk that there could be, with the new approval, sort of very costly changes that are needed, or some other changes that are unexpected. But it is only a preliminary approval, and Elon is upset because over the past 16 months, they have only received a preliminary approval, not a full one. Now, I really think that he has excellent grounds for such an expensive facility, likely $1 to $2 billion after it's completed, to be upset. But but the main problem right now is that the preliminary approval is actually caused by Elon. So what has been going on is that the Chinese gigafactory is sort of dictating a whole new process for how Tesla is going to build facilities into the future. With all the space that they had and the money that they had, they were able to not only build a million vehicle production space that's still growing, but they also have space to be able to accommodate most, if not all, the suppliers if they're still producing in country. So this is an extremely smart move because your supply chain is really short, a couple of buildings over, and therefore there are a lot of potential issues that are eliminated as you go to this process. The problem that pops up, so therefore the China facility is very efficient, very large, and growing larger to accommodate the new model for how Tesla's going to do things with not only a gigafactory but a battery factory next door. When things were started in Germany, this model was not necessarily being used by Elon or Tesla as they were in construction, but now when we look at Austin and other places, this has become the new standard. Well, the problem with this is that the original application that Tesla put in did not include the size of the facility that is now going in. So what's been going on is there are sort of change requests. So the challenge in construction is that, in theory, it should seem simple to get a change made. You want to make a change from your design standpoint, you submit it, and the government quickly finishes it. We brought an expert in to review sort of generally what was going on. It's a good friend of mine I talk to a lot, and he primarily works on residential issues, but the nature of the issues can be very similar. For example, if in fact you make a change to the plans that were submitted, well, first of all, the whole idea of preliminary approval. What he explained, for example, is let's say you are doing concrete. Well, what the building agencies will do is they'll take a core sample and send that core sample away, and that core sample is now being tested to make sure everything is accurate. And so the problem that can pop up is, well, wait a second, we did a preliminary to approve, and now we can fully approve after we've had a chance to review everything you're doing. So so there are other things that can pop up in this approval process. For example, the EIR, or environmental impact report. One of the problems that was had with this factory last year in the June timeframe was the fact that it's a sand facility that they're building on top of. So the thought was that they were going to try to tamp the sand down and just build on top, which had been the fastest way to go. It turns out that they actually needed to drill piers. So now they had to go back and get review, modify plans, submit plans for modification, because once you start doing piers, what you're doing starts potentially impacting the water table, and that creates a problem. So you get my drift in terms of what we're doing here. So Elon's argument was not that approvals weren't being given. His argument was the fact that they were not getting a fast enough turnaround when changes were being made. But the problem with that turnaround is, what if there's things like EIR reports that need to be written, whether there's community input on the changes that he wants to make, etc. So this starts to bring up sort of an interesting question, which is, I call it Elon's perfectionism. Now, there are two sort of Tesla examples that come to mind in this regard. The first one is the doors on the Model Y, or sorry, the Model X. The reason why Elon chose the doors, obviously, is they're very cool. They also make it easier for folks to get in and out, particularly if they have some kind of issues, egress and access to large vehicles. So it is a beautiful vehicle, but the delays associated with those doors almost cost Elon the company. The second component of Elon perfectionism that sort of popped up for Tesla, it's been very costly, would be the door handles on the Model S. So when Elon came up with those door handles, very cool that they disappear, it looks great. The problem though is that that's been the #1 warranty repair item that the company's experienced. And so, you know, it is very cool, it adds a lot of value in terms of look, but in things like it then becoming frozen, etc., you end up with this problem of there's certain technology that is a problem that didn't need fixing. So obviously they switched when they went to the Model Y and the Model 3, and the issues have been eliminated predominantly, but it's definitely something to consider. So where are we now? Well, it turns out that it's likely that without the changes that were made, i.e. add a battery factory to the back end, the German factory would have been done and producing cars by now, but Elon elected to try to get the whole thing through at the same time, likely delaying the start of production by at least 6 months, if not more. Now, I did some quick digging about the logic behind where the gigafactory in Reno was placed. And one of the things I remember reading about it was that by having it sequestered by itself, if there's a giant explosion and it's not anywhere near populations, you don't end up with potentially blowing up the factory and then destroying numerous homes and injuring other individuals. And you'll notice with the gigafactory, it's a lot closer to other companies and to actually populations. And so if you're going to build a giant battery plant there, there's a lot to be evaluated in terms of all manner of EIR impact, including how do you stop that fire if something blows up and starts to burn significantly and not injure other people and property in the process. So I'd have to say that I agree with the scrutiny that's being done by the Germans, because there's a lot of issues here, including the impact on the water table, how much water is required by the paint shop, how much water will be required by the new battery factory. And so I think that the delay that Elon has introduced makes sense to go after, because the ad of having a battery factory and a vehicle factory next to each other is actually a very high one. What I totally don't understand is why didn't they just build the factory first, get approval for that, and then work on approvals and start building the battery plant afterwards, rather than requiring both of them to be done at the same time. So currently, Elon's argument / Tesla's argument is by delaying these approvals, it's impacting the ability of the country of Germany / the EU to achieve its long-term goals relative to emissions reductions. And so I would say that he's right about it, but at the same time I would argue that the nature of changes aren't minor, which would have resulted in an expedited process for completion of approval. So after doing all this research, those of you who exchanged some comments with us were probably right. I mean, Elon is, the issue here is not the German government holding up this thing from working. It's really the fact that Elon and company have decided that they're going to introduce things that require a lot more time to study and understand the potential impact. And so I think it actually makes sense that there are delays to make sure there isn't other consequences for the changes that are being made. The next thing I would say that it'll get done, but that's like 250,000 cars that will not be built this year because of these changes. And I just think that it's no one's fault except for Tesla's. And as you eliminate those numbers of vehicles that are not produced, you have to reduce the expected revenue for the year. So I'd say that we're taking one for the team here in the sense that Elon is an excellent engineer. He's also a perfectionist, and he's admitted that he actually has challenges within the factory because he likes everything to be perfect, but the problem is the incremental final components of perfection could end up costing the company a great deal of money. It has in the past, and it looks like we're going to continue down that road. Sidebar note relative to the Austin factory, you'll notice that Elon is actually very close to that facility. So as he chooses to make changes and what's going to happen, obviously he has the support of the city and that area, but he's also close enough to it on a routine basis to make sure that all the details he wants included continue to be so. And I'm hoping that this will cause that factory not to be delayed in a similar manner to what we're seeing going on in Germany. Sometimes there are sort of small items, so please remember to like and subscribe. I would also like to mention that we thought there's a chance that he might shut down this facility, and the reality is no, that's not going to happen based on the amount of money put in and their goals in terms of production, plus they shut down their Amsterdam facility as well. So there's a lot of reasons for it definitely not to be canceled, but one can definitely see the delay for the 6 months and possibly longer if it takes longer to get approval for all the things that Elon wants to do within that factory. So I'm looking forward to your comments on this one. I think, it's unfortunate. It definitely has had an impact on the stock because there was expectation that the volume coming that factory would allow a nice exceed on number of cars produced. That looks like it's not going to happen, but we're hopeful that they can work out something for it to occur. Just a reminder, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy comments. We next want to move to our health tips. Don't forget your 25 leg lifts a day to make sure you strengthen the quad muscles. I want to also encourage you to consider something called a dream journal. So one of our psychiatrist friends suggested that there's a process where if you can remember any of the dream you had, to try to jot those down in a journal next to your bed. And then over time, you can use it to kind of look back at types of issues, etc., that you're covering, possibly with a therapist or even on your own. Also wanted to encourage you to consider what's called forest bathing, getting out in nature and allowing the impact of the forest and nature to impact your health and enjoyment is an excellent way to go. We also wanted to encourage you to consider no more than 4 hours before going to bed, eating minimum 2 hours to allow the food to digest, prevents acid reflux or other issues. And don't forget, no more than once a week for fried foods. And then finally, most of my friends on here like our discussion of the fact that prior to lovemaking, you might want to consider eating a salad and not a large meal, because blood flow that would go to digest that large meal is now available to other extremities of the body and for your enjoyment. At any rate, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Perfection can have its costs, and I think the factory is going to be awesome, but it is definitely going to be delayed by the new changes in the bigger facility that's being erected. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight once again. Just German over French, Lehitro, Hebrew, Choda as Farsi starts, which are Russian, Ni Hao Ma, Chinese. And in Jamaica we say, enough respect, walk good. Hey do, Swedish, good day, Australia, and namaste, our friends in India. And best of luck during COVID.